pledge, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Everybody make sure that your phone is either on silent or turned off, please. We're gonna start with public forum. Have just one. Is it Griffith? Is the last? Yes?
Yeah.
So you have the floor.
Wow, I need to go first. Where would you like me to?
Anywhere you feel like it's.
Oh, I just wanted
Thank you.
to just come in. We lived here for 3 years. We moved in back in 2020, February 22nd, and we're kind of new fixtures here. But in the time, like the first person I met here in the school district was Mr. Taylor, and I brought my kids in, and I was really nervous about coming in here and being in a new school district, but he very quickly made us feel very, very at home, and it's been the same experience throughout our time here at the school district. And I don't know if you hear that enough. I don't know if the administrators, I don't know if the teachers hear it enough, but they've made a huge difference in my children's lives. And I'm just really grateful to be a resident here in Red Creek. And so something else, even I didn't mention the bus drivers. I am really grateful for our bus driver. She's great, and she's good with our kids. And so this is something that I noticed driving back and forth to Rochester. I noticed that the Wayne School District is $23 an hour for the bus drivers. And here we have a sign up for $20 an hour. And I was just wondering what the costs were, how much of a difference would it make in the budget? I don't know what it is, but how much more would it cost to put it up and make it a little more competitive with some of the other school districts in the area? I know we've had some issues with bus drivers, and you probably have discussed this before, but it's something that I'm concerned about, and I'm curious to hear maybe what you might have to say. That's pretty much it.
Thank you. I would just like to say thank you for coming in, and we don't hear that kind of stuff often, so thank you for starting off this meeting like that.
Yes.
The superintendent can give you some information that we've gone over about the bus drivers in the past, if you're with your email, if that's is okay with you.
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Ms. Clunan, I see that you didn't sign in, did you, or you wanted to talk?
Am I supposed to sign in?
Yeah.
She's with me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just then no, you're not. Okay, since there's nobody else, just put you on the spot for no reason.
No,
I'm
it's
sorry.
okay.
Says hey.
Okay, hello, and I'm going to ask Loretta Boyce, high school math teacher, and Pam Clunan is here tonight as part of our program evaluation committee that's going to do the presentation tonight. So this presentation is going to be 2 parts. The 3 of us are going to start, and then the admin team has a secondary part to this presentation. And we think that most of your questions will be answered by the end of the presentation. So if you wouldn't mind holding questions till the end, that would be great. So you can see we had a committee of almost 40 members, and our committee included teachers from every level. It was run by myself and an educational consultant, Debbie Baker, and our admin team was part of this committee also. And this committee met numerous times to evaluate both our ELA and math programs. And as a reminder, the purpose of program evaluation was for us as an organization to look at how we're serving our students both in curriculum, instruction, and assessments, and how these items are supporting student achievement. The objectives were, again, to evaluate how we were supporting student achievement and to look at the work of the organization and what we were doing well and what opportunities we have for improvement. And I'm going to ask Pam to talk about ELA.
So I actually have done more with the math program evaluation, but I teach both math and ELA, so I could comfortably speak about ELA as well. So the committee found lots of great strengths, including starting with UPK. We're so grateful for our UPK program. We find that the students who head into kindergarten are showing a higher ability than pre-UPK existence. So that's a huge strength, and we hope Red Creek continues to keep our universal pre-kindergarten program. I'm super grateful. I've always said this about Red Creek. We have tons of resources. It's amazing in terms of their curriculum materials, our book room with leveled readers, tons of technology with great databases, varying curriculum materials to meet different needs of groups, phonics programs. Our grade levels work together cohesively in delivering our instruction. We, for example, in third grade, we use both the Wonders program, but also some of the ELA modules. Let's see. Oh, students across the district are reading a variety of literature, and that includes different cultural topics. Those are huge strengths.
The opportunities? Yeah, so for opportunities, we want to make sure that we're providing enrichment at all grade levels. We want to explore more ways to increase our differentiation. We want to provide additional professional development to staff on the ongoing use of data, and that'll be a big initiative for next year, data-driven instruction. We want to ensure students of all socioeconomic classes and backgrounds are represented in our advanced classes, and that would be at the high school level. We want to expand the use and analysis of informational texts. In our data analysis, we found we're doing pretty good with regular text, but we need more informational text with the kids. And we're going to increase our exposure to writing. So we're gonna spend some time, hopefully, building a process that includes a writing checklist, rubrics, and samples for our students. And then we have some recommendations.
Okay, so in the areas of curriculum, instruction, and assessment, we plan to complete our curriculum maps at all grade levels. We've been doing ongoing work regarding curriculum maps, and we're making good progress, including reading and writing, which we want to include vocabulary and grammar and mechanics. Getting a list of expectations for what all kids need to know at each grade level, and to make sure that there is exit criteria. And we want this to include universal language, so core knowledge. At all grade levels, we want to review all curriculum materials, and we want to increase a focus on informational text at K through 12. In terms of instruction, we want to have a writing process checklist for each grade level, and talk about like a cumulative folder that carries through from a student at UPK all the way through 12th grade of writing outcomes.
Writing samples.
Establish a process for creating and maintaining the student writing samples would be through that folder. And creating partnerships with other districts to increase exposure to diversity, such as partnerships with city schools. You could have like a pen pal or Zoom with a classroom, not only in the, here and this area, but also even like culturally, we can do something with China at 3rd grade. Evaluate and revamp our MTSS AIS model. And then in terms of assessment, keep building awareness among all staff members. What is it? What can it be used for? For example, our DIBELS, IXL, and FastBridge.
Thank you, Pam. All right, Loretta, you're up with math.
Let me just please say that this was an amazing process, and our facilitators were wonderful, so thank you for that, Cindy. We found through our conversations and our time together that we really do have a lot of strengths in the math department pre-K-12. We are using evidence-based instruction. We are, setting those clear learning targets for our kids. We have a variety of diagnostic tools that we're using, including FastBridge and IXL and our state assessments. We also have looked at, and we're currently using the modules pretty much across the board, pre-K-12, and that builds in itself some consistency for us. We also wanted to make sure that you knew that when we looked at that assessment data, when we looked at the sample data, our student samples showed us that regardless of the ability level of our students, regardless of the ability level of our students, they were willing to put something down on paper. It wasn't an IDK, it wasn't a blank space. They tried things and they showed us what they could do. Overwhelmingly, they did better on the multiple choice questions than they did on the constructed response. But we believe that that's in part due to the fact that they can solve the problem. They can come up with the answer, they just can't always show us how they get there. So many times, if they were given a picture, some kind of a visual, they did better than if they did not have that visual. But they utilized all of those strategies that we teach them in class. They highlighted, they underlined, they circled, they made a tape diagram, they made a chart, a table, a graph. They did something to help themselves process that information. Now, as we go forward though, we're really hoping that we can look at the pacing that we have set up for our kids, prioritize our skills in our content area so that we're not only helping the students be successful at their current level, but we're also helping them be successful as they move forward. And for us, that's huge. Consistency across the board. We were not able at the initial viewing of sample work to look at a lot of our unit assessments from the modules, but that's because many of us were still in module 1. We just hadn't made it to the end of it yet because they are so dense. But we want to be able to continue to collect that and record that data and use that moving forward. Now, on the heels of that, of course, next generation standards are upon us. So we need to go back and we need to reevaluate the materials we have and the curriculum that we're using. Some of our areas were hit much harder than others. Elementary took a big hit, I believe, at the 6th grade level in the changes from the Common Core to the next generation standards. So there's going to be some movement there a little bit. We're working on evaluating our MTSS, just like the ELA, and our AIS structures moving forward. What we really need is more time to work and plan and collaborate because we are our best advocates. What are you doing at your level? What am I doing at my level? We need to have those conversations. And as far as the constructed response, students having issues explaining their work, I've implemented at my geometry level with my weekly reviews, you can't just show me the math and get away with it. You need to give me a statement, a fact, or a theorem that led you to do that math so that they are putting into words exactly what it is they're trying to do. So we're hoping that that will help as well with constructive response. And then of course we also have some recommendations. Those vertical discussions that we have are imperative. I again thank Cindy for building in some time at our last staff development day where we were able to get together in some smaller groups and have those conversations about this is how it's presented at 8th grade, this is how it's presented at 9th grade, how is it used at 10th grade. But that's just a drop in the bucket. We need a lot more of that time. And again, evaluating those materials. And I know that you know that we are short-staffed at the high school. And we are doing the best that we can as far as AIS goes. We were only able to build in one class period this year to be able to service those kids. And it's a very small sampling of those kids. So we're hoping that for next year we can build in more math lab time, more AIS time, reaching more kids than just those that happen to be available during that period. We are looking at the schedule, trying to maximize that instructional time. And there was a word problem solving protocol that did start years ago, long before my tenure here, that we want to look at and revisit and bring up to date so that we can be, again, consistent as we move forward from pre-K to Algebra 2 and college courses. So the kids are getting the same message no matter where they're at, and they're using those strategies, and hopefully that'll help them be more successful. And last but not least, one diagnostic platform would be wonderful if we could use it at pre-K-12, because then the data would really mean something to us. When they leave that fast bridge area and come into IXL, we kind of lose that data at our level. So it would be nice to have something that follows the kids, that again, we can access no matter what grade level they're at.
Thank you, Loretta.
And as a reminder, of course, we always looked at our mission statement as we were doing this work. And this work fell under the umbrella of our strategic plan. And then I just put a quote in there to always remind us that we're not developing students who memorize things. We're trying to develop students to be learners, because we know that we can look anything up now. So now they have to be creative and functional. And now we're gonna slip over. And I'm gonna ask Matt and Jen and Julia to join me up here.
All right, so the next slide that you guys are gonna look at is gonna be our school mission. Can you just get over? As you guys look that over, we want you to know that based on our program evaluation and data presented earlier this year, we definitely know that we need to do more to support the development of those fundamental skills and knowledge. In addition to that, COVID really highlighted the need to support those skills and knowledge development. In addition to that, it also highlighted the problem of the lost time during instruction. Please hold all the questions till the end, because a lot of these slides may answer the questions that you do have. And just so everyone knows, this team developed plan really focused on what is in the best interest of the students.
So last board meeting, a question came up about our budget and how we're using those stimulus grants. So this is why you see the whole team here together tonight, because we as a team have been working really collaboratively to determine our next best steps moving forward based off that program eval and the other data sources that we're looking at. So just a reminder for you all, so those stimulus grants, the funds that we received due to the COVID-19 pandemic, were really a strategic investment in addressing the impact of the pandemic on our students. So these last 4 arrows are items that they specifically outlined were priorities in the use of these funds. So supporting the safe return to in-person instruction, addressing the impact of that lost instructional time, ensuring that all of our interventions are addressing students' needs academically, socially, and emotionally, so hitting all 3 of those pillars, and then addressing that disproportionate impact of the pandemic on students across different populations. So each district received different amounts of funding. As we came together as a team and said, we have 1 year left in these grants, a little over a year, what is our biggest priority in planning for the next steps? We all agreed that our North Star is addressing the impact of that lost instructional time and helping our students to grow. So what's coming next is some of our thoughts about that.
So there was a process, we all sat down, we all evaluated, and obviously all our administrators have different takes on what we need. So we had to come to consensus on what we wanted to do with our money, and Jen had a process for that. So we did use, so I just wanted you to know that it was thought out, it was thoughtful, and we listened to each other. So the program evaluation was ongoing on our data review. It identified our needs and aligned with our strategic plan that we did last year. We had solutions, we had a solution protocol for our all of our options, and our cost analysis was in there. We talked about sustainability and identification of expectations for return on investment. That was pretty important, and the coordination of grant funds and general fund usage between the 2 of them. What were we going to do in the general fund, what was in the general fund, and what was going to be used for grants.
So out of that process came these solutions to continue to support the Learning Lab teachers at the middle school and the high school levels. We're looking to contract with BOCES for our part-time ENL teaching services. We have a vacancy in ENL right now, so we were going to replace that with a library media specialist for Kyler Elementary. And finally, contract with BOCES for a part-time data instructional coach to support the data-driven decision-making and protocols across the district.
So kind of continuing with some of those prioritized solutions, you'll see in front of you a couple other solutions as well. 2 additional staff developers or instructional coaches, again, really driving at process and procedures around what best practices look like, some of the instruction and the curriculum and how that's implemented in classrooms, engagement opportunities. The middle one is expanding opportunities for professional development, and not just fly by the seat of your pants professional development, stuff that's research-based, that would focus across all the grade levels, not just one area or one building. And then this was identified in our strategic plan, and again, through some of our decision-making and collaborative talks, was looking for opportunities for alternative education program to really increase some opportunities to hit those learners on some of those ends of the spectrums.
We're also going to hire a full-time MTSS coordinator role to get our systems in line and processes in place so that we have a system to run by for the next 5 to 10 years, hopefully. We're going to expand our IT support to enhance our STEAM instruction. This year we started with a part-time STEAM coach, and we want to keep going with that. And we want to make sure that we're really supporting our new teachers. You know, we already have our mentoring program, and we want to create a position of a staff developer focused on new teachers.
So the other pieces we wanted to highlight for you, because those are really focused on that academic pillar of the use of those funds. These are other grant-funded pieces that are in place that we plan to continue for next year. So these are funded out of other grants that we have as a district. So this year we established a distance learning classroom. We've also written for a distance learning specific grant as well. We want to continue the steady work programming, supporting student employment and training. We'll continue with our mental health demonstration grant. We anticipate next year the placement of 5 part-time mental health interns here. We, as you've seen in a couple of my board updates, we are hiring community schools coordinators. We have one that will be starting in a few weeks. The other will be starting anticipated in November. We will continue to offer youth mental health first aid training, teen mental health first aid training, and mental health first aid training available to our students and to the adults in the district to make sure that we have the skills and capacity to support needs as they arise. We'll continue with the College Bound program through Catholic Charities, and we'll continue and expand our work with Sweethearts and Heroes.
Okay, what are the next steps? First, we're going to develop a plan for each one of these programs or positions. We'll also establish new positions. In addition, we'll actively recruit to hire for those positions that we're going to create. Ensure administratively aligned vision and instructional plan, which includes how we will support the teachers during this work. And then we'll also continue to explore new grant opportunities to enhance programming opportunities and sustainability. Any questions?
What is MTSS? What does that stand for?
Multi-tiered systems of support. It's a marriage of traditional AIS or RTI intervention programming and behavioral programming as well. So when you hear presentations about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, it's those tiers of support for both behavioral and academic needs.
Can we flip back to that slide that mentions that real quick? Oh, next one. Okay.
Don't we have an MTSS?
We used to.
We don't.
Yeah, could we walk, that was gonna be my question, could someone possibly walk us through the change of having one, not having one, now having one again?
So
Or did I
a
just
couple
do it?
years ago, I might have sat on the other side of that table when we established an MTSS
Mhm.
coordinator position. Over the last few years, changing priorities, that position shifted from being one person's focus to being supported by multiple people in being serving in the role as coaches. So we have tier 1 coaches, tier 2 coaches at each building. And what we're seeing right now is we really need to streamline our process and go back to that model of having one person specifically tasked with systems and procedures so they're consistent across all buildings.
So you're saying that those responsibilities were absorbed into positions that already existed, not necessarily new positions?
Those, I would say they were divided out among numerous other people,
But existing staff,
existing
new
staff,
positions.
correct.
Thank you.
But new stipends
Correct.
for like team leaders or something like that, okay.
Correct. So some of the feedback in that program eval about needing to address that system really highlights the need to have one person ensuring that continuity of service.
Can we go back to that slide one more time, please? Thank you.
course.
I have one more question on that slide. Can we just quickly talk about, or refresh our memories, I suppose, on the IT, so expand IT support. Remind us what we have for IT support right now.
So right now you have Eric Robbins, who's a teacher, and actually will be teaching an increased number of classes next year. And we have Darlene Kessler, who's here part-time, and we want to keep her part-time again next year. And then we have a BOCES person here, 2 days a week to support that. We have Daryl Prosser, who's a recent addition that's been doing STEM enrichment at the elementary level, and we want to make sure we're expanding that enrichment programming at the elementary level, and we want to make sure that we're expanding it at the high school level. Some of the things that we're going to start doing at the high school level is Eric is going to have open up a student-run IT center. These are just preliminary talks, but that's our dream, is to start a student IT center where kids are doing a lot of the fixing of computer keys and that kind of stuff. And we're hoping to roll that out actually over this summer, and we have the funding to support that.
Thank you very much.
So in the talk on a few of these slides, we talk about the 1-year MTSS. You guys think that we're gonna be good and not need that person anymore after that 1 year?
We have really high expectations for that person, get some solid systems in place.
Okay.
So our hope is that at the end of the year, we can make a more educated decision about what model is best. We want to see significant progress in those systems, and then at the end of the year say, do we need to continue this role? Do we not? Can we go back to the numerous stipended positions? Each of these, again, knowing that those grant funds expire September of 2024, we're looking at each of these really as 1-year pieces to assess what's going to be the best path forward. We have high expectations for what the next year will bring in terms of professional development and supporting some of those pieces from our program eval and making some really solid motion forward in terms of all of these pieces addressed here.
I know on another slide back 1 or 2, we talked about a couple of other positions to hire for.
Oh, right here.
Yeah, the two full-time staff developer, instructional coach positions. And again, that you're thinking that's kind of a 1-year thing. Do you think you're gonna struggle with finding people knowing it's just 1 year?
So a really interesting part of this conversation was what positions won't we struggle to find people to fill? We're looking at a couple of models, whether it's someone filling an administrative internship, a teacher on special assignment for the year, someone who may be on our staff who maybe is considering a shift in their career. It could be a chance for them to really have some experience with that. So we are trying to be as open and flexible with the titles of these roles and with that makeup to make sure that we are having candidates apply for those positions. And like I said, I think every option, we had these 2 whiteboards filled with options. Every option we had a discussion about So what are the chances we'll find somebody for this versus this? But it will also give us, this past year, we had instructional coaches through BOCES. So this will give us, you know, full-time, in-district, in-house instructional coaching to really be able to compare those two models and say, what's the best option for us moving forward?
And I think you said at the very end that you were looking at additional grants maybe to hopefully maybe be able to use additional grant funding, knowing that we have that cliff coming. To be able to use additional grants to keep some of these going potentially?
Right, so we are constantly exploring and writing for new grants. We actually spent a couple hours today, Brian and I, working on some research pieces around another grant that we're writing around school safety. So we have a really great consortium in Wayne County and some really strong grant writers. So we're constantly exploring those options to try to secure as much funding as possible. So the last option presented in there around someone to focus on new teachers. We're writing for the mentor teacher intern program grant, which would provide 5 years of funding to continue to support that role.
Great.
But we, as an administrative team, feel really strongly about each of those pieces being a really high priority, things we need to do now to support our staff now. And we'll continue to work on sustainable funding beyond year one of that.
Thank you.
I wrote a couple things down that, and you did answer, because you have a wants type, Cindy mentioned that. And then my question was, do you have what you need? And then you seem to outline, Jen, exactly what you're saying. You've explored how to meet those wants. And so thank you, that's good. The other thing, I think Loretta made the term of having time for collaboration. So I'd like to hear a little bit more of how you're seeing that, with the mentoring and all. How do you get more, because that vertical development and all. That was a great statement. Is there a way within this framework to do that?
Yeah, that is developing. We have lots of ideas for that. We have not spoken to our teacher leader group about that yet.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the first people that we want to talk to that about.
Sure.
But we have tons of ideas for how we can get that PD in on a regular basis so that we can, and they want to do it too. They said there is just not enough time in the day. So we have come up with some possible solutions. We want to talk to them first.
Yeah. So
But
I'm hearing.
definitely have ideas.
So I'm hearing two. I mean, this is really evolving from the old days of those 3 staff development days or 4, that went through the year, and you're hitting those. That now you're migrating this through the entireness of the year in places where that can happen.
Yes.
Nice, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna piggyback off Brad because I also wrote that down, that I was hopeful that it was heard, that teachers are asking for more vertical discussion time, because honestly, if I sit at a PD and do curriculum mapping and create rubrics, it's a waste of teacher time because those are already created and you're gonna go through your curriculum the way you can based on every different class you have. It's not gonna look the same every year. But the vertical discussions are necessary, and if they're asking for that, I really hope it's being heard. And like the one common program for data, it's really hard when there's multiple, and people spend a lot of time processing and going over data. And if there was one assessment, you could spend less time on data and more time on teaching. So I hope that's
actually one of my
really
questions.
being heard.
Is that a thing? Is it a thing where there is one platform that goes K-12 right now?
There is.
There is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So based on everything that was discussed tonight, we heard that there was going to be looking for new positions. Are all of those positions currently for next year going to be grant funded?
So new positions, yes, with the exception of, if you go back one more, the change that Bill spoke about of taking our current ENL and replacing that with a library media specialist and moving the ENL services to BOCES. So the first piece here of learning lab teachers that we're still discussing based upon some of those options. So Cindy mentioned, we have lots of ideas for how to support ongoing professional development, and we have a lot, as we kind of divided out the dollars, a lot of dollars earmarked for that. But some of the actual dollars for each position are yet to be determined based on our discussions with the teacher leaders around that. So right now, we are planning these pieces to be, the next 2 slides with the 6 items on them, to be grant funded, and these pieces on this slide to be focused on our regular budget.
So based on those pieces of the regular budget, how much is in there right now?
Right now, we're currently supporting our learning lab teacher from the middle school. Our high school is currently supported with grant funding. And the ENL is just a switch out with the library media specialist. So we have the funds left over from right now, currently we have a TA in the elementary library. So we have that funds available with the retirement. We have the funds available from our current ENL teacher with her retirement in our regular general fund.
And the last item here, our current instructional coaches are funded through our stimulus grants. So that would be a shift to move those into our BOCES for next year.
So, when I'm looking at these two, as people talk about, there's a whole menu of things available from BOCES. These elements are within the whole consortium element, or everything that's nothing outside of that. So it's working right within what's available through our own BOCES. Okay, thank you.
The more math lab time and AIS time that Loretta spoke about, does that require more staff to make that happen? Or
So that could be supported by the hiring of a high school math teacher. which
Okay.
Hopefully we're on.
because I know we have a vacancy for a high school math teacher. So that time would be worked out if we can just fill that vacancy. It wouldn't be another need on top of that.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other questions? I just want to say thank you. It was a great presentation, and sometimes I think it's helpful for our group to see what the wants and the needs are, and then where the funding comes from, because obviously that ties back into what we're budgeting for and where we need money to make sure we're supporting what your team thinks that we need. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, and the fact that you're working with Bill, so the two ends have to connect. What's the budget end and what's the needs on the instructional end. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, all there. All right, we're gonna keep moving. On to C, the minutes of the regular meeting for the March 22nd and the 20th.
Yeah.
Take a motion from Mrs. Allen, a second from Mr. Dates. Any questions, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. D, the financial reports. Can I have a motion for the treasurer's and the warrant report for February 2023? Mrs. Kaiser, a second by Mrs. Bliss. I believe that there were some questions about some of the items in these reports too, and I know that the superintendent had said that he would get back to them as soon as he could. So if you do have questions, I would suggest that we vote on these now unless you feel that you can't, and then we'll discuss that after the answers come out from the superintendent.
I'm concerned that we have now more lines that are overspent, 70 lines that are overspent or over encumbered, which doesn't follow the purchasing policies. There's 10 that are over the 20,000, which is the transfer request to the board for permission before the expense takes place.
I believe that was part of the questions today, is that correct?
Not for me. I said it last month, but now we just increased that more this
Might
month.
have your emails confused, so.
like to address
The
that?
budget transfers that were approved at the last meeting or the meeting before took effect in March, so you'll see that on the March treasurer's report.
It's not what I was questioning though.
Do you wanna restate your question, or?
No, I have already said it.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor?
Hey,
Any opposed?
excuse me.
I'm opposed.
Abstentions? Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move into the consent agenda section, E. So, I would take a motion for E, F, and G. With one minor change, I don't have numbers next to, under F for personnel, so I'm gonna say the second item, under the personnel, the internal paperwork, had a clerical error on it, we just wanna confirm that that's listed as a probation start date,
Which one was that?
the second item on there.
The appointments?
Yep,
Oh, thank you.
you're welcome, under personnel.
Okay.
So we'll get that corrected, as it reads here, it's accurate, so, I would take a motion with that stating that it's a probation start date.
Sorry, where was that inaccurate?
On the inside piece is not on the
Gotcha.
agenda.
Gotcha.
Under the second.
Mr. Nordine?
I'll motion.
Thank you, sir.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Dates. Any questions on this group?
I'm gonna ask for privacy purposes not to receive social security numbers. In the future.
Can make a note of that. Any other questions? Okay, when you're ready.
Mr. Dodd?
Yes.
Mrs. Allen?
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser?
Yes.
Mr. Dates?
yes.
Mrs. Degman?
Yes.
Mrs. Madigan?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, moving on, H, new business. I'm assuming we'll take these individually. Take a motion from somebody.
Sure.
Hold on, hold on, here.
You wanna do them individually? Is that what you said?
I would
Right.
assume so.
I'll
Yeah.
do H1.
Thank you, Mrs. Bliss. And a second, Mrs. Kaiser.
Mhm.
Okay, so for the budget update. Please.
There was not much to report this time around. The revenue, I tightened up some of the state revenues, bringing them more in line with what they probably will be. The state still has not passed its budget, so we're using the executive runs that came out. We've somewhat been told that we can rely on at least that much, and that we shouldn't have revenue that will fall below that. The budget that I have, or the revenue budget that I presented to you does not exceed that number. There were some other minor changes that I was able to make in the expenditure side, which brought everything together. I do not know yet when the governor, or the governor and the legislature are gonna get together and, with their compromise budget. So at this point, you're probably going to see the same budget next week. I'll lock that down this week.
Okay. I think there were also some questions regarding this that
There
need
were.
some time to answer, so, I'm hoping that we'll have, the answers to those prior to next Wednesday and we can have that conversation.
Yes.
Any new questions? Thoughts?
I do have a couple of observations. I think they are more of, when looking at your proposed budget by function, so looking at expenses, I'm wondering if it's possible, perhaps for the next meeting, so overall, there's an increase to the budget of 2.89%, which is in line. It's not a huge number, it's very acceptable. But when you start to look at some of these individual line items on the document that you presented to us, there's some alarming changes in some of these budget line items. Anywhere from 30, 40, 50, 80% increases.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's possible for us to just get an idea of what those changes are. I mean, we've got, so some of the things that stuck out to me were we had 4 different areas of the budget. We had general support, which includes your superintendent, business official, maintenance, grounds, stuff like that. Overall, that increased 17.65% of the budget. The next section is all your instructional costs, regular ed, administration, special education, all of your, like your occupational therapy, all of those services. That increased 3.88%. Transportation increased 7.61%, and then basically our benefits and debt service decreased 3.4%. So when I just look at those numbers, again, going back to what our administrators talked about and all the things we want to do for instruction, my first thought is, wow, our instruction's only going up 3.88% when we've got, say, general support going up 17.65%.
Julian, can I ask you a quick question before
Yeah.
you keep going? So when you're, for those of us maybe a little less familiar with the budget numbers and the allocation, when you say that they jump out to you, is it the ratio between the numbers, or it's that it's 17%?
It's actually, it's 70% of that number, but it's 65% of the increase is all in the general support, so it's not for instruction. And tonight, as Jolene stated, is we just learned that the goal is to have those positions, some of it supported by the general fund. But the focus of this budget is definitely in administration and operations and maintenance.
Well, part of the budget is, or part of the presentation tonight was grant funded, right? The majority of it would be grant funded.
Well, what I'm wondering is if maybe there's a way for us to all be able to notice that, those types of increases, or kind of maybe what is red flagged when you, I might not notice them quite as clearly or quickly as others. So I didn't know if there was, you just threw out 65% of the total. Is there a way that we might be able to say, any percentage over 10% change needs to have some sort of explanation? Or is the threshold 5% or 20%? I'm just saying that maybe that would help.
I mean, I think if I could relate it to, you know, if we were to say, okay, our own personal budgets, if you look at your personal budget and a part of your personal budget goes up 40, 50, 60%, that might cause area for concern.
My number would be much lower for concern, Jolene, so.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, so when I look at this, I'm not looking at the ones that are going up, you know, just a little percentages. These are easy to stick out. And then when I look at instruction and the total instruction for regular teaching, our regular teaching, which we're thinking we really probably need a 6th grade teacher, when that budget overall went up 0.66%. Special education went up 7.63%. Like, those should be main focus areas for our district, and they're going up such baby percentages. Or I get that we have a lot happening out of grants, but we won't always. And, you know, it's just knowing where we've been and where our focus needs to be. It's just a little confusing that our central printing and mailing is going up 84.85%. What the heck are we, like, what are we doing there? For it to go up almost 85%.
We do have, we have, to put into perspective though, we're dealing with smaller numbers in this section.
Right.
So a $15,000 increase is going to be 84%.
And I do,
No, I totally understand it, and I do understand that maybe we do need to come up with a way to come up with explanations for numbers that are that, numbers that, in percentage-wise, are a little bit larger than other parts of the budget.
right. And I absolutely, am very aware of those are smaller numbers, so the percentages get bigger quicker, like, I definitely understand that. But, I mean, those are still, if this amount of money was sufficient last year, but now this, so maybe it's a small dollar amount, but it's a large change, like, what is it that's changing so much that's doubling the cost of that service that we got for that last year? So I do know that we aren't necessarily talking about big number of dollars, but when, we could add another teacher, or maybe look at that Schedule B and what can we add in that Schedule B to add more money for our advisors and stuff like that. That Schedule B needs to be, or maybe looking at, maybe we could put just a couple more dollars in transportation for that bus driver. Granted, I know that falls not into that instructional area, but we've talked about us being low on our salaries. Is there room to maybe bump that just a little bit this year to try and catch up, with the memorandum of agreement or something like that, as opposed to so much going into general support? That's just my overall observation, and just my general concern about where this budget falls.
Bill's, thought about percentages, when it's a small number that goes up significantly, that's a high percentage. So let's just start, you're right, Jolene, on this, on the top line, Board of Education, 53.5% increase. How did that happen? I mean, let's start with that, we gotta answer for ourselves.
Board docs, that's easy. But
Is that what it is?
I would imagine so. We didn't have board docs last year,
Right.
this year, but,
But we know about that one,
sure.
Right.
so it's easy to explain to ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know that until you answered that was the board docs that
I'm
caused
just
that.
assuming.
You're assuming, so, okay.
So, like, the tax collector, it is a small, when you look at the number compared to a $24 million budget, the tax collector line, which I don't know what the individual parts and pieces are making up the increase.
I can tell you, Wayne County is no longer going to be printing and mailing our tax bills, so we have to go outside of, we have to go to most likely a private printer.
Okay.
And that's going to take money, unfortunately, because they have to maintain the databases and do the research.
And I think probably some of those answers, I would have been able to kind of come to those conclusions myself. If it was function object, then I could look, okay, it's not in salaries, it's not in contractual anything, it's, but I wasn't sure where that increase was coming from.
Sure.
But like Kate had mentioned, maybe we could set a threshold where if it's over 30% increase in a line item, if we could just get a brief explanation of it's going up this much because
Well, maybe if it's a two-step thing, so if it's going up 30% and it's more than $10,000 or
Right,
something like that.
right.
So you don't have a $2,000 line item
Right.
that went up 50% and it's
Yeah.
3,000 now,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
I think that might help some of us understand trends and changes as well, along with sustainability of what we're trying to do.
I have a concern, I'll talk about the revenue, but just to piggyback on we just talked about the library budget, and the library budget's only going up $622,000. It hasn't been reflected to say, hey, we're gonna move that one position down into the library budget. So, I'm not sure when that decision was made, but it's still not reflected as of today. But my concern also is with the revenue. The revenue for the state aid as this year is not all going to be received as proposed and sent to us. But we are also decreasing expenditures such as the health insurance by 200,000. And what happens with that money is at the end of the year, when you don't spend it, it becomes fund balance, all right? And you can make it into an appropriated fund balance. When you don't spend it, when you cut it, you're actually cutting your fund balance, which that's what this budget is currently proposing. So you're going at a deficit of 200,000, but you're not decreasing your fund balance by 200,000. So what that means is that you're creating a budget that's a deficit. You're gonna have to make up for it the following year, because you won't have that fluff anymore in the budget to keep you whole.
When we're facing a funding cliff.
Exactly.
Could you possibly end that with a question so that I know? I guess what I'm wondering is, so the best way to adjust that is what you're saying is it needs to be adjusted to not have the fluff so that we're not.
Well, you're gonna be counting on the appropriated fund balance for the following year, and it's not going to be there. So, I mean, there are concerns. We haven't as a board talked about a levy or the options. We haven't talked about the reserves. I asked for a breakout at the last meeting that still wasn't provided. And that's something that we have to all vote on. That's going to be presented to the community.
So the revenues, I feel like so the revenues state that we're going to use $445,000 from reserves for the 23-24 budget, correct? But we're not, do we know what reserves we're planning to use?
Bus reserve, unemployment reserve, and I will have to I'll have to look at the third one.
How can you use an unemployment reserve when you don't have expenses?
Because it's budgeted.
No, you can only use a reserve if you have the expenses and you don't have the expenses.
Correct.
So how can you be using a reserve to make your budget whole when you don't have the expenses?
The auditors have told us if it's on the expense side, we can put it on the revenue side, and that's what we've done.
I'm gonna
When you say
respectfully
expense
disagree.
Do you mean budget,
Yes,
not actual?
correct.
But you're budgeting
But you can only
$3,000
use-
though,
You can only use your actual.
Which are actual expenses?
Yes,
but you don't have any expenses, and you're only budgeting $3,000.
correct, and I believe that's all we're using I think that's all that we're using out of the reserve.
$3,000.
I'll verify that. The
So
reserve balance sheet was also included in last meeting's packet as well.
It's not about the balances, it's about what does the 445,000, what reserves are you using for that?
Okay.
I think you just named two of them, didn't
There
you?
were two of them, I need to take them.
Is your question where is that 445 coming from?
Yes. And we're keeping our appropriated fund balance the same for 23-24.
Yes.
But are cutting for the following year 200,000 at least.
Okay.
And then why wouldn't we be tapping into the debt service when there's $100,000 of local tax share from your building aid to your expenses?
I'll take a look into that.
Yeah, we do have a lot of money in our debt service fund, don't we?
I'd really love to see some of these questions get asked ahead of time so that we can see an email response and everybody can have good information in front of us at this time. so that we can all feel comfortable voting, instead of having these questions at this point in time.
I've been asking questions for quite some time. They just didn't happen tonight.
And we do send emails with questions.
So I think that, and we've talked about this before, I think we need to find a way that we're all on the same playing field to understand the information and what we're looking at, and try to make sure that everyone's questions are being answered. So, when we come up with ideas like how to see red flags and how to be looking at the information and maybe dissect it and understand it a little bit better, I think that will improve us as a team. But I do think it is helpful that when things are answered, that there's time to digest it, understand it, before we're here. So I'm gonna ask if there's any other questions. I know that we're obviously gonna be talking about the budget again next week. But if there's not any more now, and there are more, I would suggest that we send them right away so that there's time to process, get the information back, ask follow-up questions if there are, so that everyone can feel comfortable next week.
So if we ask questions ahead of time, are we able to still discuss it here, or do we just want to answer and ask questions outside of here?
No, I think that we should still have the discussion, because I think we need to have transparency, but I think that for maybe questions that come in close to the meeting and then they aren't able to be pushed out all the answers, then you might have some people unsure on what the questions were. And at least for me, sometimes seeing them in print, it's a lot easier for me to understand than just when we're talking about it verbally, because my education in it is just not as deep sometimes.
Visual.
Yeah, way visual. But I think that I know that in some of the questions that I've seen regarding the budget and even other things, it's more than just the question. Sometimes for some of those of us that are asking questions, there is a little bit of explanation why you're asking and how you came to it, and that's helpful for me. So, and maybe that doesn't always come out when we're only talking. So I think it would be a good rule of thumb that we try to give the administration 48 hours, get you through your packet as quickly as possible to get your questions out. And then we follow the same process that when they're answered, they go back out to the team. And then if there's more questions from there, then we'll at least all have the background on where we started and why we got to those types of questions. But
and actually, when that goes out, public sees it, those questions may be shared at other places, not just here. So be able to have those, defining answers here is important, not just to us, but to publicly, because there'll be other persons other than the 7 of us that have those questions.
well, and we'd also talked about, I'm gonna pick on you, Mr. Griffith, because you're the only one here tonight, but we had talked about possibly having the public, if they had something for public forum or concerns, that it would be agenda related, so that people could understand that, there could be questions about bus drivers and its regard to the budget and where the money was being spent. And if that was the case, now we have this whole other section of questions or concerns or ideas that we can work into our discussion for the public, and it can maybe answer these things at that time without directly answering people. If that sounds good to everybody. So, any other questions for right now? When you're ready.
Mrs. West? Are we voting?
Wait, are we voting?
No.
We're not
No.
voting on anything right now.
Sorry. I got a little wrapped up in the discussion. So I don't even know why we took a motion. But we'll keep moving.
We're not voting on anything, I don't think.
Sorry, guys.
She started to say 2.89%. I wrote that down. I even said to Kim, I'm like, are we voting on this? All right, so we're just gonna ixnay that. You can just cross that off. Okay.
Number 3.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, so can I have a motion for H2, please?
You're on H2.
But we're not why are we taking a motion on H2, we're not approving?
Was there a discussion for that though? Cause we were supposed to take a motion if we're, is there any more discussion?
What are you taking a motion for?
For that line item?
I think you need to have a motion.
Okay, well, I didn't know if there was any other discussion, and normally we don't have
For the
discussion
RFP,
without any conversation.
you can have a discussion without having a motion, you're not.
All right, well, does anybody have anything to say on
I do.
H2?
Of course I do, come on. All right, for the request for proposal, it was indicated with your firm that you're gonna be, that you're recommending, that they meet with the audit committee to discuss the audit process. It says that on page 6. But then when you go over to the fee, the proposal, it states that there will be additional charge for meetings with your board or audit committee totaling $350. Is the $350 included in with the total price?
I don't know, I have to take a look at that.
Doesn't make sense that it's a requirement, but they're gonna be charging you additional, why wouldn't they just?
Offhand,
add it?
I don't believe it is, because the other proposal had the same, had a similar structure, but I will verify that.
Okay. And did you chat with these folks, or did you just, did you interview these folks again, or no?
I did not interview the actual firms. We took a look at the data that we had, and we checked references.
Okay.
Other questions?
What's the next step with this? How does it work?
Hmm?
How does this work? What's the next step?
You would approve it next
We
week?
would, we would recommend it next
You would
week and you
recommend
approve
one
it. So we
of
wanted
them?
you to see it before the meeting that you were approving it. So
Okay,
it-
so you
in
guys
case
will
had a question.
decide between these two?
We
Or-
have, so we,
This would,
Bill did the references, we just wanted you to see it a meeting before you approved it.
Okay.
There's a score sheet that Bill and I sat down with and scored it, you know, on different attributes.
Okay.
any other questions? Okay, let's move on. H3, could I have a motion, please? Thank you, Mr. Dates, and a second by Mrs. Kaiser. These are always fun. Any questions?
I just wanna say one thing.
Sure.
The cooler that we're surplusing, it's been 3 years in the making. We have a pass-through cooler that is in the elementary cafeteria. And what they've had to do, it would go down, so they were having to go around. We put in another doorway to make it easier for them to go around. And over break, we were finally able to get that cooler replaced. And what it is, it's a cooler that sits in the wall, and they can access it by both sides. Somebody from the kitchen puts something in there, somebody from the line pulls it out, making things so much easier for them now that it's back up and running
Great.
again. It's a wonderful thing to
That's
have back
cool.
up.
Just kind of laughing with people having to walk around it, but.
It's a lot of trays.
Yeah, I was gonna say, hungry kids, when you're right, see.
Okay, Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Dates,
Yes.
Mr. Nodine,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
and Mrs. Madigan.
Yes, thank you. With no correspondence, I would say, was there any questions on any of the administrative reports?
I had a couple of things that I was going through them, for a couple of the different administrators. Mrs. Hay, I wanted to just comment that, I really enjoyed reading the staff reflection summaries, particularly question 2 and question 4. Question 2, it said, at what point of the day did your outlook parallel that of students in your classroom? How does this change your perspective? I just loved that frame of mind that you guys had in the work that you were doing. A couple of the answers to that I loved was, one had said, I had a difficult time sitting for extended periods of time. This is one reason why I believe and know from research that frequent movement breaks are important and healthy for learning. Like, I just loved that recognition. And another one was about midway through the beginning activity, there was too much disorganization, too many people thinking out loud at once, made it hard for me to think. I can see this happening at some students during lab when there's a lot going on around them. We have so many students that learn in so many different ways. It's just great to, see the teachers and different staff sitting and reflecting. I just thought they were great. And the other one was question 4, describe one way in which today's work will affect future planning, instruction, and or interactions with students. There were a couple that just talked about recognizing that everyone learns at different paces and in different ways, and I just really appreciated what was pulled out of that work that you guys did. So that was a great update. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I just say that I agree with that, and all I could see when I was reading those was a new, like, wall thing like they have in the high school with all the nice things to be to people, caring and stuff with all of these, and maybe it would be inspirational to the kids, so.
That's a great idea.
I thought it was really great.
Yeah. For, is this in here? No, okay. Does anybody know, she talked about field testing and that Red Creek was selected for field testing, and what is that?
That's pretty common regarding any type of state assessments, so regions or the 3 through 8 testing. It's kind of goes with the territory, so to speak. So each year it's random across the state where you might receive notice that you were selected to get field tested. And that's just the state embedding new questions for future assessments.
Into
so
like your specific school's tests?
So we're, no, that it's just a field test, meaning that they are sampling them out to see, to develop some consistency assurances across the board. So it would not be part of the state assessment or the Regents exam. This is a standalone day, or it would take place during a classroom.
Oh, so it's like another test that they're gonna take?
It's not scored, it's not graded, it's
Oh,
not,
okay.
it's really just for feedback for the state.
For those of
if-
us that didn't know what it was, though, we thought it was more of an accolade.
Ah.
I thought they were gonna like come and look at the tests
Yeah.
that had been taken already or something.
And you kind of just took the wind out of our sails.
Sorry.
I had no,
It's-
so they're gonna take
We're
it.
helping the state develop some consistency in their,
Like
in their
wow.
questions and to make sure that the line of questioning is appropriate.
It's
piloting.
Yeah.
it's a pilot thing. It's more of a burden than an accolade, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So
That's kind of what I just got from that.
we've been lobbying the state for years to embed the field tests into the tests so that kids don't have to sit separately for them.
Yeah,
Which
right.
they've done some of that, but not to the degree that we would like.
Jolene and I were excited about this. We were thinking it was this like, type of award, and here you are, like, geez, I hope we can get rid of it. Man.
For Mr. Taylor, who's not here, but I think you guys talked about it a little bit, the STEAM rotation. In his update, he talked about the STEAM rotation, K through 5 with Mr. Prosser. Like, what is that?
Yeah, so, this week they were working on code.org, so students were able to do actual coding, programming. The first activity that the 5th graders did was designing and building a habitat for a reptile of their choice.
What does that look like for like kindergartners? Like STEAM stuff for kindergartners?
Same, the code.org, kindergartners are on there doing it. It really is amazing. We're doing it right across from the elementary office. One class at a time goes in, and he has lessons planned that, with the 5th graders, they're more harder, obviously, than with the kindergartners. So the kindergartners might go in and actually have tools to build with, hands-on, to develop a habitat for their animal. It's more in the upper grades, first you research the habitat, and then you design it on paper, and then you build it.
Very cool.
So that one is a 3-day one versus kindergarten just has the 1 day they go in and they get the materials and they actually build. So it's very hands-on. It's definitely very exploratory. The code.org, I was in there the other day, and it really is amazing. That it was 3rd grade when I was in there, and it was their first day, and they'll have another day of coding. and they have these little coding challenges. It's amazing what they can do.
That's cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And the last one I had was for Mr. Van Norman. You talked about new homework protocols to help with, you know, increasing grades and stuff. What do the new homework protocols look like?
So they're not really new, even though I listed them as new, we just re-implemented some of our old homework protocols at the middle school. Again, teaching, reinforcing good skills, completing work. So for instance, students that did not turn homework in by the due date would be asked to stay with those teachers at night to complete that homework.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Everybody else is off the hook.
If you arrived tonight, this whole parking lot was packed because there were games going on down here. It was packed. It's great. You know, we've got superb weather. Fields, Pat's and his crew's got it in good shape. Now I'm going to speak as a sport official. I was disappointed in the fact that I don't know if who can look into this, if, you know, Andy is, Mr. Rubert, the fact there was no umpire for the modified game tonight. So Billy had to umpire it. He was doing it, and then there was no umpires that showed up for last night's JV baseball game. So the coaches had to do it. That's not a fair position for the coaches, the kids, or even the parents for what you want to have there. So
We'll look into
I
it.
hope that can get rectified, whatever problem that is. You know, speaking as an AD, those are the things you don't want to have happen
Especially at the JV level.
at any of them.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions about the administrative reports?
I'll make a motion to go into executive session to discuss a personal matter.
I will take that motion. And a second. Thank you, Mrs. Kaiser. Okay, thank you.